Today, we're excited to be joined by Joan Cetera, Vice President of Enterprise Communications, Global Government, and Corporate Affairs at Caterpillar. That's a big job. There's a lot there. Joan's career in public relations has included senior roles on both the client and agency side. Prior to joining Caterpillar, Joan served as VP of Communications at PepsiCo Foods North America and Senior Vice President of Consumer at Edelman, and in the same roles at MSL Group and Oval VPR. How am I doing so far?
Great.
You're there? All right.
All true.
Perfect. At every stop, Joan's grasp of how brands best serve consumers by understanding their needs has built platform after platform for great stories. She's a Chicago transplant to North Texas. We'd love to talk more about that. Speaking of good stories, and we're very glad to have her here for this conversation today. Joan, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So on Giant Stories, we always like to start with just a conversation about you and your story. How did you get where you are?
Oh, today or in life?
Oh, I mean, I heard about your commute down from Irving, so it was a little bit rough.
Exactly. No, I was a journalism major, was kind of my my path,
Right.
and graduated in the late 90s thinking I would go to grad school and I would be the, in-depth reporter, political reporter who kind of, dug stuff up and really got to the meat of a story.
Right.
I interviewed for the graduate school, and the gentleman who ran the program, his name's Charlie Wheeler at University of Illinois at Springfield, said to me, and I went through my whole who I am and what I do, and I had done PR internships and all these things, and he goes, yeah, I really think you'd be better in PR. And I was heartbroken. He's like, we could let you into the program. You have all the qualifications. You've done all these things. He's like, but I really think a PR comms path is your path.
What did he see in you when you said that?
I don't know. I never asked. And the funny thing is, like, we've kept in touch with him over the years.
Yeah.
But I never asked what it was. But I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was like, oh, okay, this is what I was going to do. But it was one of those moments in life where you just kind of have those interactions where you're so glad you did, because it changed my career trajectory. I then, moved back home, got a PR internship at then Golan Harris, which is now Golan, and it set me up for the rest of my career. So I think I owe Charlie that direction, even though in the moment, it was not the news I wanted to hear.
Career paths are never straight lines, are they?
No, sir. Nope. To your point, I never thought I'd be sitting in North Texas.
Right.
But, I think after 18 years of agency life,
Which is like 75 years in dog life.
Oh, yes, sir. This is why my hairstylist is kept in good business to take care of all the, all the white hairs are taken care of. I had the opportunity to go in-house, as they say, and join an amazing team at Frito-Lay running, at the time, marketing communications. So working with all my friends in marketing on all the fun brands. Yeah. And did that for about 3.5 years, then was given the opportunity to be the head of communications, did that for 5, all through COVID, and then kind of leveraged a lot of that experience to bring over to Caterpillar to be the lead communications role there.
So how's it been transitioning from one of the world's largest food companies that has so many brands within it and has so many unique stories to tell for each brand? I mean, you can see, just watch any Super Bowl broadcast and you're going to see several of those commercials to a totally different category, totally different products, obviously, that tells totally different stories. Was that part of the allure? Like, how was that transition been?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was, I had done on the agency side a lot of CPG brands. I'd worked on P&G brands. I built a Facebook page for Pepto-Bismol back in the day. Oh, nice. So I'd kind of done that side of it. And so, yes, industrial machinery was new, but it still is equally recognizable. Yeah. I think one of the fascinating things that I didn't expect, I knew I lived in a world where, like, you just see Cheetos, Doritos, Fritos everywhere. Yeah. I then know I've transitioned to see Caterpillar machinery everywhere. And when it's not our machinery, like the construction going on outside your office, I get a little miffed. And I'm like, wait, I now identify those competitors.
It's kind of like seeing Pringles at the shelves. Like, hey, wait a minute.
100%.
Right.
So it's still, I'm very proud to be a member of these companies that are part of everyday life, that people do recognize the cat logo. You can buy T-shirts at Costco with it on there. The cat hat, Ryan Gosling, when he was rehearsing for the Oscars singing I'm Just Ken, wore a cat hat. Wow. So the cat hat is so ubiquitous and is part of pop culture. So I think that's actually the lens I was able to bring to the new role was this is still that we have a very powerful brand.
Yeah.
How does that kind of halo up to a corporate brand with Caterpillar, and how can we leverage it and build on it to tell our story?
So talk a little bit about Caterpillar's presence in culture, because to your point, like they're the company with the machines that build things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That clear the way to build things. And so how have they made their way into culture? What is it about the Caterpillar brand's story that is permeated all the way to Ryan Gosling's hat, which he was amazing in that performance.
Oh, I know, right? Wow. He was so great. And we're so grateful he wore hats the day before.
Thank you, Ryan Gosling. Thank you. Absolutely.
It is, I think the Caterpillar brand has been helped by the fact that we've been around a very long time.
Yep.
Next year will be our centennial. So we'll be celebrating 100 years. And we've been at all these major milestones globally throughout that. Little things like Caterpillar machines helped build the Hoover Dam, helped build the Hollywood sign, helped power, and this is the interesting segue, power the generators that put men on the moon. So we've been part of all these major milestones over those 100 years. So it's the interesting part, though, is the primary way people know us is the big yellow machine that you see on the side of the road.
Iconic.
The harder part...
Color's iconic even.
Totally. Yeah. Yes, it's it's trademarked, the whole thing. Yeah. But where people don't know us is that Caterpillar, much like a Frito-Lay, much like a P&G, actually has multiple brands under the heading of Caterpillar. We have Progress Rail. We have trains. We have generators that are actually generating some of the power that is needed for AI and for all of these data centers that are growing more and more. So
especially in Texas, it's kind of crazy. Actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have all these other industries that we are part of that I think are lesser known. So to your question of what was the challenge for me going there, I have a great opportunity to tell a story of where do we go in the next 100 years, right? Because Caterpillar's in all these very important parts of people's lives globally.
Yeah.
And what a great opportunity to have those stories to tell.
Absolutely. Just real quick, talk about your involvement with Ford DFW and Caterpillar, specifically in North Texas, because many people might not know this, but Caterpillar is actually recently relocated to this region. So talk about your involvement with Ford.
Oh, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
So Caterpillar relocated its headquarters. We still have many, we have 113,000 employees globally.
Yep.
But our headquarters are now in Irving. And the ask was made of me, and you'll laugh because lots of those people have just moved down from Illinois. I did it 9 years ago, and they were like, Joan, how do we get known in North Texas? How do we kind of get on the map for people to come work here, for people to know that we're here? And I immediately thought of Forward DFW, having been, on the ground floor with it with Frito-Lay. And I was like, oh, well, I've got an easy way. Let's work with these guys. It's a way for us to get the brand name out there. It's a way for us to tell stories that people may not know about Caterpillar. And the interesting thing is, because we've had those couple of years to kind of, get our bearings, so to speak, we've gotten really involved in the community.
Love it.
So kind of hearkening back to the original vision of Forward DFW is telling those community stories. We have plenty to tell, and we're excited to tell them. So Forward DFW was a great avenue for us to do that.
Love that. Shameless plug for those who are watching or listening. 4DFW is a product of the Dallas Morning News, so it's a wonderful avenue for companies to demonstrate corporate involvement and corporate citizenship. So thank you for that, and thank you for being.
No, you guys are great partners.
So talk about when you're looking for great stories to bring to life. You've given some amazing artifacts of what Caterpillar has represented, but even let's go back into the Frito-Lay days. So when you're working with all these brands, especially around the Super Bowl, because from a PR perspective, that's when or maybe an NFL partnership. Talk about, when you're seeing marketing programs come forward, and what are the elements of a story from a PR perspective? You're like, okay, what's actually going to really catch on and get traction with the media or whomever you're targeting?
Sure. No, happy to. And I love that you keep mentioning the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl was our Super Bowl.
Exactly.
A lot of people are like, oh, this thing is our Super Bowl. No, it truly was.
Actually, literally is the Super Bowl. Right.
The interesting thing about focusing on marketing is the distinction of what is newsworthy and what isn't.
Right.
I oftentimes would kind of get information brought to me, and it was like, yeah, okay, it's a new product or a new flavor.
Right.
People introduce new flavors, new products all the time.
Yep.
That on its head is not newsworthy. What we do with it, the backstories we tell, is what's interesting. So when I think of good storytelling, it comes down to how we, remember when we were little kids and we used to sit on our parents' laps?
A long time ago.
I guess not that long. And get told bedtime stories.
Right.
They had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they made you feel something.
Absolutely.
They weren't just information. It wasn't just, okay, Jack and Jill saw a hill, period.
Right.
There's a story, and there's a cadence to the way that we as humans tell stories. And I try to remember that every time we're looking to publicize something, right? Because for me to, let's break it down to a tactic. For me to write a press release and say, Joey Schmoey today launched X.
Right.
It's not that interesting. But the backstory of why you're launching it, if it is a new flavor, why? What were people telling us? One of the most interesting...
or did you collaborate with an NBA star?
Right.
I'm trying to think of, it was one of I think it might have been with Tostitos or Fritos. You had an NBA partner. I mean, NBA and NFL have always been good partners for Frito-Lay. So that's fodder for good stories. So it's not just a flavor release. It's somebody helped develop that, somebody co-branded.
Absolutely. And the more that you can bring it to a consumer, the tighter in you can get. We had a product at Frito-Lay called, and I'm going to forget what they were called, but it had been discontinued.
Okay.
And then a GoFundMe was started to bring it back.
Love it.
And it gained so much momentum and so much online engagement that we brought the product back.
Right.
So we were able to
That's a great story, just in and of itself.
So then you could tell that story when you were trying to get awareness that the new product was out.
Love that. So you're talking about story arcs. It's the way that we think about it. We sort of have this critical context. So like, what is the narrative and the context within which this is going to be interesting? And then what's that inciting incident? What is the thing that's going to draw somebody in from a story perspective? And then especially from a PR angle, like what's the earned ending? Like what is it that what equity are we gaining, and what trust are we earning from consumers to want to engage or buy or shop or browse or visit or do whatever, right?
Sure.
So talk about when you guys are looking at partnerships, and whether this is with Caterpillar or Frito, just in your experience, when you're looking at partnering with brands, how do you think through co-creating these stories together? Like, how do you evaluate the value of that from a partnership perspective?
Interesting. I think so. It ultimately comes down to, can we craft the story? Like, the trick of my role is there still has to be a business benefit.
Sure.
Right? I think so many times internally, because I've now worked, in-house for a decade.
Yeah.
There's the thought of, yes, okay, we should do this, we shouldn't do this. Sometimes it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
I think that's, It's not
Probably
only
more no's than yeses. You're probably being, strategic about what you're trying to accomplish.
And if we're going to actually go out there, I firmly also believe in doing it across mediums because these days stories are you can tell stories in so many different ways than you used to be able to, right? I think when I started in communications, it was earned media only. And there were lots of options.
Sure.
You could have media lists that were really, really long. Now with the advent of social and how many stories we've seen in both, my current role and my previous role, news outlets have more traction with their social channels than they do on the actual outlet, the original outlet. So I think to your point of partnering and what we think about from a storytelling standpoint, can it also travel, right? And what are the quarter turns on that story?
There's a PepsiCo word, quarter turn.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Well,
harkens back so many memories.
But it's such a good way to think 100%. About it because then that means, okay, in that 360 communications, how am I quarter turning a story so it matters to an employee?
Yeah.
Employee storytelling, I think, has come a long way. I think internal comms or employee comms used to always be seen as like a nice to have, not a must have. Yep. I think between things like going through COVID, going through people working in different ways, the stories that your employees hear about the company, I would argue are almost the most important because then that's what they go and tell people.
Right.
That's what they're going to say in an elevator when people are like, where do you work? Right. And so the quarter turn, so it's an applicable for an employee audience, applicable for an investor audience. I've worked at publicly traded Fortune 100 companies. That's a key audience. But at the end of the day, every audience is made up of humans who want to be told a story, not just facts and figures.
So talk about that because at Frito, for example, it was really easy to get internal employees excited about what you're doing because you can show brands and campaigns and here's what we're doing. Here's the spokespeople, like Deion Sanders comes in and gets everybody fired up or about, whatever it may be. How do you think about that at Caterpillar? So a company with amazing heritage and history, and obviously a massively important role in the category. How do you get internal employees excited about what's going on, whether it's campaigns or initiatives and things like that? Like, how do you craft stories for that?
Yeah. It's funny. It's not as easy as bringing a celebrity in because sometimes people would go, oh, okay. Like they'd almost see it as a little much.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is so that people can see themselves in the story.
Love
right? That if in an internal event, let's say it's a town hall, a quarterly meeting, are you representing as many of your employees in that meeting as possible? So both of the organizations I've worked in the last decade have strong frontline workforces. That audience is really at the top of everybody's minds to make sure they feel included, that it's not, they're the ones who were still going to work in factories 5 days a week during COVID.
I was going to say, like, if the spotlight's shown on them because if frontline workers for Frito-Lay aren't showing up, then food's not getting in the store. If frontline workers for Caterpillar aren't showing up, the construction's not being done. I mean...
They are truly critical employees.
Right.
And so the focus and the ability to include them and have them feel included is paramount. And so I think when to answer your question, it's not just the fanciness or the hook of an event. Yes, Deion might be the hook. But if we can show a gentleman or a woman who has driven 1 million miles in a Frito-Lay truck safely, then everyone who also has a similar job feels...
Galvanizes the workforce.
People want to... I was just on a call earlier today where I'm like, people want to feel heard. People want to feel seen. And if you feel seen and heard in your workplace, you become an advocate for it. You're that much more likely to stay. So I think that's the similarity with Caterpillar too. I think we've started a new series called Strategy at Work, where we start to talk about what are the strategies of, how are we reflecting the Caterpillar strategy, which is to help our customers build a better, more sustainable world.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play out in an employee's day-to-day life? And so we've done, kind of these round table. I'm a big fan of round tables or panels.
Sweet.
Right?
I have one this afternoon, as a matter of
It's
fact.
so much easier than standing up and giving a presentation, and it is just a little more natural.
It's authentic if you're doing it right.
Mm-hmm. And so with Strategy at Work, we've brought in different aspects of the company to have them tell the stories
That's great.
of how they're bringing the strategy to life. And it really, again, people can go, oh, okay, that person's representing our energy transition.
Okay.
And they're talking about, what we are doing in the energy space. I can see myself through her. And it just, that connection and making sure we have that as much as we can. That's literally what I wake up and think about every day, is like, just make people feel something, make them remember, because if you feel something, you'll remember it.
Absolutely. Maya Angelou. Talk about, you had mentioned cross-medium storytelling. How do you think about that at Caterpillar? Because to your point, you've got so many constituents that you could be talking to, whether it's internal, whether it's the street, or whether it's consumers. And, you operate and you connect in a very different way as Caterpillar with potential consumers than a CPG brand would. So talk about that, how you think about platforms.
Yeah, it's definitely, because we're not B2C, we have dealers and customers.
Yep.
So our dealers, like you could drive to a Holt Cat dealer, which is the North Texas dealer here.
Okay.
And that's where you would actually purchase the machine. That's where you would get it serviced. So the power of our storytelling has to also influence and connect into what that dealer is doing.
Well, they want to embrace it, right? I mean, if you're giving them the materials to tell a better story, it's only going to help them sell more vehicles, right?
Absolutely. So to go back to the example of the Centennial, we have done things that are specific for our dealers so that, first of all, awareness, right?
Sure.
I literally for years have made the joke of #no surprises, but I live by it, where I'm like, my job is to make sure as many people know what we are up to as possible so that nobody's surprised.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference, is that storytelling has to kind of permeate and resonate enough so that people can kind of take it in.
Yep.
And then make it their own a little, right? Because one dealer in North Texas may be telling a very different story than a dealer in Arizona, right? Just because
what companies are there, or what prospective companies are there, and what are their needs going to be?
And the customer needs are going to be different.
Exactly.
But the commonality of the storytelling needs to kind of trickle through. So that's really the biggest difference between the two companies, is that, that B2B layer gets added into it. But we still, we have myriad social channels for all of our brands. And, our social channels are sometimes how employees find out information, not just our intranet.
Because intuitively, that's where they're going to go for any kind of, to search any brand.
Absolutely. Right. So why not make sure that, okay, if something goes, because the other big thing I always say is internal is external, right? Both good, bad, and otherwise. But so if you're putting something out on your intranet.
See Glassdoor, right?
Yeah, exactly. But why not also put it on a facility Facebook page?
Yep.
Because you're right. If you're working a frontline job, you're not in front of a computer all day long.
No.
But when you have a break or when you go home, you're scrolling. Why not be part of that scroll and meet people where they are?
Yep, absolutely. I love it. So let's talk about, what stories do you think right now, just in culture, marketing culture, PR culture, do we have in overabundance? What's What are we oversaturating right now?
Well, can I say politics? I mean, it is October 1st.
God, please
so...
let November be here and gone as soon as possible.
But I think, I mean, all kidding aside, we've even seen, you know, because part of my job is still earned media,
Sure.
getting stories out in traditional major media outlets.
Yes.
The pendulum, you know, we've literally gone to them and been like, hey, we want to tell this story. We'd love to talk to you about this. They're like, okay, that's great. Talk to me on November 11th.
Yeah.
Because so many of them are being pulled off of their
Just drowning everything out.
day-to-day beats that it's
Yeah.
like an energy force, right?
Well, yeah, I can tell you the newsroom around here between now and the election is going to be plenty busy, not rightly so, but it's hard to get any oxygen for anything else, right?
But so that, to answer your question, I also feel like good, happy stories.
Yeah.
I shouldn't use happy, but like feel good stories are lacking. It's funny, the New York Times started doing, like, I subscribe to their newsletter, and they literally, I think it's on Friday or Saturday, for a while there, they've stopped because, again, I think their energy has gone elsewhere, started to do just feel good stories. Just like, tell me a good story about, you know, somebody in Dubuque, Iowa, going to the grocery store, having, like, because those stories, I think as humans, we need to hear those as much as we hear all the other ones, just to have balance.
You know, I think that there's actually, and I'm by no means a psychologist, but there's something about, for every X amount of negative stories you have, you can actually kind of fill your cup with one positive, right? Because I think we're somewhat numb to all the negative things that are out there, that you can over-index on sort of refilling your emotional cup in a positive way with one positive story. I think that's where brands have a real opportunity. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's simple entertainment, whether it's aspiration, whether it's inspiration, I think that's where brands have the biggest opportunity.
It's why, so it's so funny. If you look at the way advertising has gone, look how much humor has now kind of been reinfused in advertising.
Yes.
And I think it's because we need that outlet.
Absolutely.
Right? There's so many, and because we are all walking around with, you know, pocket computers, for lack of a better term, that can give us information whenever we want it. We can curate where that information comes from. And it's very rare to just have those moments of levity, those moments of brightness.
Well,
and
yeah, I think that also, you know, for all of the benefit that big data and, you know, the AI's ability to help us synthesize that big data, you risk getting into such a programmatic, formulaic thing when creating advertising that you forget we're talking to human beings. And, you know, all the algorithmic empirical data that you can extrapolate from something isn't going to tell you how to be funny, isn't going to tell you like what is going to trigger them emotionally. It might tell you what their needs are. It might tell you how much somebody makes, where they live, how they view certain products. But it's not going to tell you like what's that creative trigger. And that's where the creativity and bringing stories to life, like where we do is as masochistic as some of us might be sometimes about what we do. That's where the brilliance comes from.
Right.
This is what's great about telling stories, is that we get to do things that find those little human nuggets that somebody will laugh, that you connect dots in a way that nobody would thought possible. And all of a sudden you've created culture, you've entered culture, you've driven culture. Like, that's the magic in what we do.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
That's literally those moments. We used to call them at Frito like moments of joy.
Yeah.
And you know you've struck gold if you can hone in on that. And I think that is like, when you think of what I contribute to an organization, it's what's that surround sound storytelling that we can, because you can have a piece of content that makes you laugh, but then what's the cool behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Where somebody also, so you've now gotten someone's attention, they've now felt something. What's that little extra nugget that you give them so they also feel in the know?
Yeah.
And that's where you build brand affinity.
Absolutely.
Right? Of all the brands at Frito-Lay, Funyuns has like the strongest brand of affinity because people feel part of something. It's like, oh, you love Funyuns? I love Funyuns. That says something about us. We're now connected.
Well, and it's the community, but it's also, again, you go back to the vehicles you have to tell a story. thinking of, to your point, like behind the scenes, the making of, conversations on social media that a particular spokesperson might get into as part of the deal. Like that's where the magic of storytelling can really come to life. And if you have that fun little hook, like I think of Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis and their Super Bowl commercial, where it was, what was it, their song that it was hilarious. But the way that it showed up in different spaces, beyond the Super Bowl commercial, that's what makes those kinds of efforts worth it.
Yep. Oh, totally.
Absolutely. Okay, so last question: how do you see storytelling evolving over the next 5 years?
Oh man, I'm going to go on the record with this. Yes. Oh man, okay.
Yes, we're gonna put in a 5-year time capsule. We will revisit.
Please don't. Unless I'm right, then please revisit. Yeah. I think 5 years is pretty close in. My gut is there will likely be another social channel that'll become like the, thing people pay attention to. I think 5 years ago, we didn't see TikTok being what it is now.
No.
But TikTok has become the only way my daughter, who's 15, gets information.
Yes.
And so in 5 years, she'll be 20, right? So I think the TikTok influence on storytelling will likely have played out in the next 5 years, which means we might have even less time to connect with someone. If you're marketing or communicating with people, you've then, we all like for video. Once upon a time, you used to be able to do a 3 to 4 minute video and people would watch it.
Would watch more than 15 seconds. Yes.
Now you're lucky if you get a minute.
Yeah. Oh.
And
it's gold if you get a minute. Yeah.
Right. And so I do worry a little that that's going to get shrunk to 30 seconds, which means as anyone who's trying to get a message across, you're going to have to be super crisp, super quick, and clever. I think the ability to...
this much time.
Right.
Right.
And then be gone.
Yeah.
Be big, be bright, be gone. Right.
And be shareable.
Yes.
That's the biggest challenge.
So I think storytelling, so there's that. I think that's where the pendulum's going to swing. But then you look at the flip of that and you look at people who listen to long form podcasts, who watch, 6-parter stories evolve. So either, I think it may almost become polemic where you have that or you have really long.
Yeah.
I don't know, the 23-minute sitcom that sits in the middle, that may go away.
Isn't it funny, though, on the streaming services, you think about that, a lot of those shows, even the shorter ones, like they're not locked into any particular formula outside of whatever production confines that they're working within, right? So the show might be 43 minutes, it might be an hour and 16, but like there's nothing preventing them from shortening or extending through streaming services.
Whereas you and I grew up knowing the rhythm of a 23-minute.
You knew the commercial pods. You knew exactly where they were going.
Totally.
You knew when you had time to go to the bathroom. So
yep, I know.
100%.
Now who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank God for the pause button.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Joan, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really fun conversation, and we look forward to sharing this with the world.
Oh,
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Giant Stories is a production of Medium Giant and our parent company, the Dallas News Corporation. Interested in learning more about how your brand's story can be better told and sold? Visit mediumgiant.co or send an email to hello@mediumgiant.co.